Alright, today we have a mental model. And what a mental model is a way of looking at things that will hopefully help you navigate the world more effectively, either by being able to predict outcomes or give you signposts or general heuristics for ways of thinking or acting. And this mental model is of worldview construction itself. Now, I like to call this the web worldview, and it's something I've been thinking about for a while. The traditional view of worldview construction is that one needs to work on ideas and create and lay a foundation and build knowledge up on that foundation. So it's like building a building or a pyramid, and this is how it's often looked at for worldview construction. In this sense, a lot of people tend to weight heavily accuracy of the worldview, as you do not want to have a weak foundation. There are some other implications as well. You are building up from the bottom, and so in that sense, there tends to be a great focus on the bottom, and you can even, I like to think of it as digging deeper to make sure the foundations are extra strong. You're going to be looking for truth as a bedrock. So the discipline of philosophy has, historically speaking, been concerned with notions of absolute truth or capital T truth. And I think that's largely due towards the idea that they want to start at the bedrock and build up from there. And that's informs their motivation to try and seek truth to make sure that their foundations are strong. Okay? So the model I am proposing is it's an analogy, just like the building analogy, but instead of thinking of it as a building, thinking of it as a web. Now, a web, it's instead of having the abstract absolute truths at the bottom that form a foundation and then you build knowledge or a worldview on top of that, with a web, the important part of the web is the things that apprehend or touch the edges of where the web is built. And I like to think of this as the things that actually interact with reality. And so, even though abstract thinking is important, if there's no interaction with reality, nothing gets done and the web just falls. So, the outer portions are of central importance, but they're not the actual things that catch bugs. The innermost portions are what would be the foundations in the foundational model, or the lowest portion of the foundational model, and that's the part that's going to catch a lot of bugs, but it is informed by the external world. And so if you are into philosophy, this would be more of an empiricist view rather than a rationalist view. The rationalist trying to build knowledge out of nothing, starting at foundations, and the empiricist saying you need to observe reality in order to arrive at anything. So there's a structural difference in terms of how you're doing the construction. With a foundational model, you build up, and with a web model, you build in from where you're touching reality. And this informs what the types of things you're going to pay attention to. With the foundational model, you're trying to build on absolute truths. And with the web model, it's a little bit different. What you're focused on is touching reality. You want you want in addition to touching reality, sorry for the pause, there's also no effect where everything just topples down because you made an error. If you make an error in the foundation, the entire building can collapse. If any one string of a web is removed, the web still functions. And so, because of this decreased focus on precision and absolute truth, there's an increased focus on just overall volume of the worldview. And let's unpack that a little bit. The processing of the web, when you're dealing with a worldview as a web, the processing is more like neural connections. Okay? First of all, it's associative rather than just building straight up and scaffolding. Okay? And second of all, there's a compounding effect. It's like rolling a snowball, in that the more items you have to construct your worldview, the more things each neuron, or like metaphor of the neuron, can attach to, and the more robust your worldview becomes. By having more and more things, you can make more and more connections, you can compare different things, you can make new analogies, and it's a volume game rather than an accuracy game. And ideas scaffold off of each other, not off of the base. And so they build off of each other rather than building up off of a base, and it expands out. So, some ramifications of thinking of this differently like this, or thinking of this. Thinking of worldview construction as building a web rather than building a building, constructing a building, sure, is that you're going to be much more focused on just churning through lots of information and synthesizing that information with each other in order to try and create robust models that can predict and inform action. With the foundational model, you are going to, there's not that, the focus is on accuracy, and it's on building the foundations of what often becomes very abstract thinking, which becomes further and further removed from actually touching reality. So the web worldview is much more embodied and much more focused on volume of ideas rather than trying to get just the one right idea and then build up off of that. I think that this has interesting implications in terms of ways of thinking, and that while this idea is somewhat in its infancy, and I'm still working it out, or trying to work it out, I think that this is a better way to look at the world so as to not get stuck in armchair philosophy and just looking down from your ivory tower and not actually being involved in the world, because the far abstract foundational type of views are almost, they're an activity that doesn't seem particularly in line with what it means to be human, and I think that it's missing the mark, which is ironic considering what it is aiming at absolute truths. And so I imagine I'll revisit this idea, but for now, that's all I have to say on it. So